In 2007, I was a stay-at-home mother, freshly divorced, needing to return to work, and it was this predicament on which I was focused as I sat in my sunny living room sharing a coffee with my mom. In my former life, I'd worked in neuro-ICU, and while this fast-paced field was familiar to me, as a more seasoned nurse I recognized it as a young woman's sport. I wanted something more reflective of the person I was now. My mom weighed in with her opinion quietly. Have you thought about palliative care? Like what you did for the last few years of your career? No, I hadn't. Interesting. Maybe I should look into it. As I looked back at her, I could tell she had something more to say. Jan, I have leukemia. She had agreed with her old school hematologist in their first meeting that transplants and systemic treatment would not bring her to cure and would wreak havoc on her calm and pleasant retirement life of grandchildren, short hop trips, and bridge. Instead, they had decided on a course of symptom management involving transfusions, antibiotics as needed, trying to avoid hospital, and living as well as she could for as long as she could. As she spoke, I nodded and wept and tried to comfort her, but inside I was screaming, "No! Find a treatment! Find a cure! Don't give up!" She died 17 months after her diagnosis, and she lived well until her very last day. Our wonderful palliative home care nurse, Carla, guided us all through the difficult territory of serious illness and dying. The care and guidance that Mom received convinced me that palliative care was my next chapter as a nurse. Soon, I was immersed in graduate school and working as a consultant in the proving grounds of a very busy tertiary care center, where palliative care was the poor cousin to the appealing promise of curative therapies and exciting interventions. The job was busy, intense, and it sometimes seemed as if the work barely made a dent in the suffering of people as they were admitted in a crisis to quickly approach end of life. One day, I was asked to see a young woman who, after a medical tourism trip to Mexico, had landed in Calgary on her way home and was immediately brought from the airport to the hospital in respiratory distress. She was 35, very advanced cancer now metastatic to her lungs. Line of treatment after line of treatment had failed to keep the disease from marching on. By the time I met her, she had spent 2 years in cancer care with a life-limiting advanced disease, and she and her large extended family were staring at death completely unprepared. Our service was consulted for end-of-life planning. As I sat at her bedside, I wondered, how do I help a young woman and the people who love her to plan for her death as she is imminently dying? How do I help someone go from A to Z when I'm meeting them at Y? The best I could do was to help with her distressing symptoms and to be compassionately present for all of them as her death unfolded. She died in hospital, in a strange bed, in a strange city, fortunately surrounded by loved ones and nurses and physicians who cared for her. The aftermath of her death, for her family and for her healthcare team, was considerable. It was so different than my experience with my mother. Her end of life was careful, considered, and it was her choice. I didn't realize it at the time, but my mom and her healthcare team had mapped out an early palliative approach to her leukemia care. My young patient didn't know that she had that choice. Since that experience, I have worked to promote an early palliative approach to advanced cancer care. Every day, I make sure that people understand they can prepare and they can make choices and they can live well with their advanced disease as the end of their life unfolds.